Joan Cartan Hansen. Thank you for joining us for this Dialogue Web Extra Conversation. We're talking about the Arizona immigration law. And gentlemen, we've got 5 people on the phone. Let's go ahead and get through some of them. Terrell in Driggs?
Yes.
Go ahead, sir.
I was just wondering, they have so many illegals in here that the people that want to come here legally can't even get work permits. I can't understand that.
All right, let me ask our guests about that. How is getting a permit to legally come into Idaho possible? Is it difficult? What's the status of actually trying to legally come into the state of Idaho?
It is possible. It's extremely limited, and in fact, because it's so limited, it's the reason why we have so many community members that are here working with no immigration status. And that's part of what Congress needs to fix, is be able to rework those quotas, basically so that immigrants are able to come into the country legally and are able to exit. You know what? That's one of the interesting things that has occurred as a result of doing more enforcement, of making it harder for people to go back and forth. We actually, in essence, force people to stay here. Now, it used to be that we used to have programs like the Bracero program, for example, where immigrants came legally and then they left. And during, gosh, almost like 20 plus years, 4 million immigrants participated. Now, with no system that works, we have roughly 12 million in the country. So again, there needs to be reform so that we have a program that works.
Okay, let's go to...
I'd like to respond to a comment.
Okay.
I agree with you. The Bracero program was very effective, but it's very different than what we have now. If a person wants to come to the United States and work, they can get a temporary permit. Under the Bracero program, only the worker came. The worker came, the worker worked, and then the worker went home. Currently, a person can come with a temporary permit and bring his family, and that's a distinct difference.
Right. After certain years, I mean, part of the problem is that the numbers that are allowed to come in through the legal channels is so limited. And the thing is that our country has become addicted to immigrant labor, but at the same time, we don't have a program that has actually allowed people to come in and work.
Well, I would agree with you that our country is addicted to cheap labor. And I'm concerned for those people who subject themselves to the people who exploit cheap labor, because they could cheat them, they could treat them unfairly. But let's not forget that these limitations are not just on Latino nations. There are limitations to all countries as far as how many people can come here.
Exactly. No, I agree.
Okay, let's go to Liliana in Meridian. Liliana?
Yes,
Hi.
I had just a couple things. The first
Why don't you
thing
just
is-
pick one, because we're running short on time.
Okay. Well, Mr. Jorgensen talks about the combination of elements and reasonable suspicion.
I'm
So
sorry, we're
let's
having a hard time. Go ahead.
Let's just cut to the chase. He's skirting the question. He's not talking about what those elements are, and it is racial profiling. And if it's not, I'd like him to be direct as to what those elements are that they're using to.
Okay, so
determine
I apologize. We're having a little bit of a hard time hearing you. So, as I understand it, your question is, what are those probable cause elements that would lead someone to would lead an officer to question someone as to their immigration status?
Yes. And I'd like him to be.
Okay, I'd be happy.
I apologize.
I'd be happy to respond to that. That is a very defined legal question. Probable cause has been around for a long time, and what probable cause really means is the totality of circumstances. It can't be one issue. Could it be breaking a noise ordinance in the morning for starting up your lawnmower? No. It's got to be some things that contribute to the possibilities.
And will race be one of those?
It is specifically prohibited that race cannot be a reason.
And right, so that's the law, right? Do you think in practice that's exactly what happens in this world?
Can you tell me, Mr. Morales, if you can distinguish a Native American from a Mexican by physical appearance?
I'm not sure if I can.
Yeah.
However, what's the issue here that I think that you're trying not to answer is the fact that race is still a factor that folks are going to be able to use.
I will make the point, and it's very specific in the law, that you cannot question somebody strictly because of race or color. It has to be reasonable cause, probable cause.
Let me get our next caller. Terry in Cul-de-sac.
Hello?
Terry, go ahead.
So I'm really angry, Senator, about what you say about racial profiling not being part of this, because that's absolutely what's going on. In Idaho, we passed a law about seatbelts, and they said, oh, well, you can't get pulled over for not wearing your seatbelt. But if you're pulled over for speeding, then they have probable cause to assume that you're not wearing your seatbelt and give you a ticket if you're not wearing it. So a person gets pulled over for speeding, and oh my goodness, you're brown. Are you legal? You got to be kidding me to think that racial profiling isn't going to be part of this.
Okay,
That's
let me go
insane.
ahead and
I'd like to
give him a chance to talk about that.
I'd like to respond to the caller. First of all, if you're pulled over for a violation, you're required to have your driver's license. That's what we're talking about. Okay?
Let's go to Terrell in Driggs. Terrell, are you there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Go ahead.
I was just wondering what my biggest question is. We have a lot of illegals here, and yet I was talking to some people here who hire legal Spanish people, a large group of them, and they can't get work visas to come into the United States because it's overflowing with illegals. I just don't understand this, and yet we were not doing anything about it.
Okay.
Again, I think there's, of course, lots of frustration across the country for this. I think it's more the reason why we should work to ensure that we have legal workers, right? The reality is we have 12 million workers in their employers that are not necessarily following the rule of law. And when we work for a comprehensive immigration reform, we're going to require undocumented workers to register for a visa, and they will be legal, and therefore are able to have a better system. And again, that's part of the problem, is that we have a large population of undocumented workers.
What stopped Congress so far from making the reform? The problem obviously hasn't gone away.
Oh, definitely. I mean, part of it is we have this political environment where members of Congress don't have this courage to stand up for a small minority, I would say, that is actually saying that, for example, a legalization, border security, an opportunity citizenship all in one doesn't make sense. So again, I think that Congress has really been scared of a small minority that says legalization doesn't make sense.
Okay, I've got one more caller, Dwayne in Riverside. Dwayne.
Why don't you propose bringing in Mexico by dividing it up in 3 states and by treaty to make them part of the United States, giving them full statehood?
Well, that's I think that they fought several wars in Mexico about the United States coming and taking Mexican territory. So, but it's an idea. Thank you for your call.
Well, it's an idea, but you might ask Mexico. They have their sovereignty, you know.
That's their. Let me toss one last question out because we were rapidly running out of time. Do you think we should, whether it's a federal law or a state law, require citizens to carry ID? ID that, is it something all U.S. citizens should just be required to carry an ID?
I'll be happy to go with that.
Sure.
First of all, no. And even under the Arizona law, there's no requirement that citizens have to carry identification. There is a federal law that says that all immigrants must carry documentation.
But if I say I'm a citizen, if I'm stopped in Arizona and I say I'm a citizen, and if the police officer can actually take me to jail until I can prove that I'm a citizen.
Well, actually, the police in Arizona are required to contact the federal government and run the E-Verify checks or the safe checks. No, they are discouraged from taking someone to jail, as you suggest. Okay, so the Arizona law requires that they immediately contact and confirm whether the individual is a citizen or is not a citizen.
Yeah, and again, there are many community members, that they're not carrying their ID, whether that's passport, state ID, driver's license with them everywhere they go, and I think that's the issue. And part of what we're seeing, sometimes policies like what's in Arizona are actually leading to eventually to like a national ID. And so that's an issue that I don't have a strong opinion on yet, but I know it's something that many Idahoans are very concerned about. And again, policies requiring folks to identify themselves, like policies in the state of Arizona, really take us in that direction, perhaps.
So if you're driving, you have to, you're
Well,
supposed to have your driver's
I have a
license.
strong opinion about that too. No, I do not want any kind of a national ID. And there is no law that has been passed or is passed that requires that you carry identification.
I was just one of those proposals that, if they're looking at immigration reform, if we want people to prove their citizenship, that's it. Any last words before we wrap up this Web Extra conversation? Anything that you didn't get a chance to say that you wanted to comment on?
Well, I've enjoyed the discussion. I think it's beneficial to ourselves and the listeners, and I really look forward to this topic being further discussed and explored.
No, I agree with what. I mean, the issue definitely needs to be explored, and then we need to pressure Congress to take action. You know, the reality is just looking at the 12 million undocumented workers, really, those are community members that have actually the majority have more than between 5 and 10 years that have been living in the country. Many of them are actually in the process are getting their immigration status, and so the fact is, right now there's a huge backlog. For example, there are some community members that applied like in 1992, and to this date they haven't received their immigration papers. So again, it's a broken system. It affects Idahoans, Americans, regardless of immigration status and so on, and I hope Congress can pick it up.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. We appreciate you so
Well,
much
thank
for both
you.
of you for coming in today and talking about this. And thank you for joining us for this Dialogue Web conversation.